FOMC 2025, The Great Monetary Illusion. Every eye in the financial world is fixed on the Federal Open Market Committee. They watch for a pivot, a promise of a soft landing, perhaps another desperate bailout. But what if this entire spectacle is a meticulously crafted illusion? What if the very news you consume, the narratives you're fed, are merely a sophisticated lure? The real knife isn't coming from the expected inflation figures or the latest unemployment data. It's coming from a silent, systemic re-architecture of global finance, happening just beneath the surface of public awareness. This isn't about economic fine-tuning anymore. It's about the fundamental redesign of money itself, designed to trap your wealth, your privacy, and your very autonomy within a new digital cage. Your old money, your old freedoms, are being systematically rendered obsolete. We've run the simulations. We've traced the unseen lines of power, the mathematical inevitabilities, and the cold, calculated intent of those who stand to profit. This isn't just a forecast, it's a mission briefing. Over the next few moments, we will expose the true implications converging on the final FOMC meeting of 2025. We will show you the hidden forces at play, the engineered crises, and the ultimate goal behind the curtain. Only by understanding this deeper game can you identify the one path that truly protects what's yours. The unseen collapse, why the Fed is trapped. The financial world, as we know it, is not merely teetering on the edge of a cyclical downturn. It is undergoing a fundamental structural collapse, driven by a force far more potent than any policy decision: mathematics. For decades, the global economy has been piling debt upon debt, sovereign debt, corporate debt, household debt reaching figures that are not just astronomical, but mathematically unsustainable. We are talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars, euros, yen, a financial black hole that now threatens to swallow the very institutions designed to manage it. This isn't just a large number. It's a weight that is crushing the foundation of the global fiat system. Consider the Federal Reserve, the supposed guardian of economic stability. Its dual mandate, to maintain price stability and maximize employment, has become an impossible mission. The sheer scale of global indebtedness has cornered central banks worldwide, leaving them with no viable path forward that doesn't trigger a catastrophic outcome. This is what we call a forced move. It's not a choice born of ideology or political preference. It's an inevitability dictated by the cold, hard logic of numbers. Let's trace this predicament to its core. If the Fed were to genuinely fight inflation, it would need to raise interest rates to levels far exceeding anything seen in recent memory. The consequence? A cascade of defaults. Governments, corporations, and individuals already leveraged to the hilt would buckle under the weight of higher borrowing costs. We would witness a deflationary spiral, a brutal economic contraction, mass unemployment, and the implosion of asset markets. This path, while theoretically sound in classical economics, is politically and socially unacceptable to the current establishment. It means a complete reset, a painful deleveraging that would destroy trillions in nominal wealth and dismantle the existing power structures. Conversely, if the Fed continues its historical pattern of accommodating debt through quantitative easing and artificially low interest rates, the alternative is equally grim: hyperinflation. By continuously expanding the money supply to service unsustainable debt and prop up failing institutions, the purchasing power of the currency erodes at an accelerating pace. This isn't just about rising prices for goods. It's about the fundamental debasement of money itself. Here, the Cantillon effect comes into sharp focus. Those closest to the money printer, the large financial institutions and government entities, benefit disproportionately from this new money before its inflationary effects ripple through the broader economy. They get to acquire real assets at deflated prices, while the purchasing power of the average citizen's savings is silently stripped away. It's a stealth tax, a transfer of wealth not through explicit policy, but through the very mechanism of money creation. The institutional sociologist in us observes that the Fed, like any complex organization, prioritizes its own survival and the preservation of the system it oversees. It cannot allow either hyperinflation or deflationary collapse to unfold unchecked, as both scenarios threaten its legitimacy and existence. Therefore, the forced move is not a surrender to either extreme, but a strategic maneuver to navigate between them, even if it means dismantling the old system to build a new one. This isn't mere incompetence. It's a sophisticated, albeit painful, transition. Adding another layer of fragility to this dilemma are the global supply chains. Our supply chain fragility expert points out that decades of just-in-time inventory, globalized production, and underinvestment in critical infrastructure have created a brittle system. High debt levels prevent robust investment in resilient supply chains, making the entire global economy susceptible to exogenous shocks. A minor disruption can cause disproportionate ripple effects, leading to shortages and further inflationary pressures, which then feed back into the Fed's impossible mandate. The internal algorithmic models, auditing the flow of capital and the fragility of these interconnected systems, are screaming a singular message. The current trajectory is unsustainable. There is no mathematical path to a soft landing within the existing framework. The system is structurally compromised. This realization leads us to the critical understanding. The last FOMC meeting 2025 will not be about minor adjustments. It will be a pivotal moment in a preordained systemic reset. The problem of unsustainable debt, the reaction of economic instability, and the inevitable solution, a new financial architecture, are all part of a larger Hegelian blueprint. The old system is being allowed to fail, not accidentally, but as a necessary catalyst for what is to come. This isn't a failure of policy. It's the calculated dismantling of an obsolete structure to make way for a new form of financial control. The Fed is not trapped by its mistakes, but by the mathematical reality that demands a fundamental shift, a shift that will profoundly impact every aspect of your financial future. The Hegelian blueprint, crisis as a catalyst for control. Having explored the mathematical inevitability that has trapped the Federal Reserve, we must now confront a more uncomfortable truth. The crises we face are not merely random, unfortunate events. They often serve a purpose within a larger framework, a pattern of social engineering known as the Hegelian dialectic. This isn't a theory of shadowy figures meeting in backrooms, but a demonstrable, recurring pattern in history, a method by which societies are steered towards predetermined outcomes. The formula is starkly simple: problem, reaction, solution. First, a problem is either created, allowed to fester, or amplified to a point of public outcry. This problem can manifest as an economic collapse, a pandemic, a geopolitical conflict, or a combination of all three. In our current context, the problem is the unsustainable global debt, the fragility of our supply chains, and the inflationary pressures that erode the common person's purchasing power, all vulnerabilities we discussed in our previous segment. The institutional sociologist observes that institutions, in their quest for self-preservation and expansion of influence, often leverage existing vulnerabilities, or even exacerbate them to create the necessary conditions for change. When the system is structurally compromised, as our algorithmic auditors' models confirm, the path of least resistance for those in power is not to fix the old system, but to manage its controlled demolition. The second stage is the reaction. Once the problem is sufficiently acute, it generates widespread fear, confusion, and a desperate public demand for a solution. People, overwhelmed by uncertainty, become more willing to accept radical changes they would have vehemently opposed under normal circumstances. This is where the Overton window shifts dramatically. Policies once considered extreme or authoritarian suddenly become palatable, even desirable, in the name of stability, security, or collective good. Think back to how quickly unprecedented measures were accepted during recent global events, measures that fundamentally altered daily life and economic freedom. This collective reaction is not accidental. It is a predictable human response to engineered chaos, a response that is then skillfully channeled towards a preordained set of interventions. And this brings us to the third stage, the solution. This is the critical reveal. The solution presented is rarely a genuine, organic response to the problem. Instead, it is often the very outcome that was desired by the architects of the system from the beginning, a solution that fundamentally reshapes the existing order to consolidate power and control. In the context of our current financial predicament, the solution being ushered in is a new, digitally controlled financial architecture, a shift from the traditional fiat system to what we will come to know as central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. This isn't merely an upgrade to digital payments. It's a paradigm shift. Imagine money that is not just digital but programmable, money that can have expiry dates, designated spending purposes, or even be frozen or confiscated based on algorithmic triggers or social compliance scores. The algorithmic auditor warns us that these CBDCs, managed by black box artificial intelligence models, represent an unprecedented leap in financial surveillance and control. Every transaction, every financial interaction, becomes a data point within a vast, centralized ledger. This is the ultimate manifestation of the panopticon lens, a system where you are always watched, always tracked, and your financial autonomy is entirely contingent upon your adherence to the rules set by the central authority. From a crypto-anarchist philosopher's perspective, this represents the complete antithesis of individual sovereignty. It's the closing of the financial commons, replacing the relatively open, if imperfect fiat system with a permissioned, controlled environment. Your ability to transact, save, or even accumulate wealth could become a privilege, not a right, granted and revoked at the whim of an algorithm or a policy decree. The very concept of financial privacy, a cornerstone of personal liberty, would effectively cease to exist. Furthermore, consider the underlying technology. To secure such a vast, interconnected, and universally deployed digital financial system, the institutions are already racing to implement quantum-resistant cryptography. Our quantum theorist understands that the advent of quantum computing poses an existential threat to all current encryption standards, including those underpinning existing banking systems and even current blockchains. The development of quantum-resistant solutions, while presented as a necessary defense, also represents a massive technological leap that will be controlled by state actors and their allies. This creates an even deeper chasm between the capabilities of the state and the individual, solidifying their technological advantage in this new financial order. Control over this next-generation digital infrastructure is not just about security. It's about who defines the rules of engagement in the digital economy. The material scientist might also point out that in a system where all transactions are digital and programmable, control over physical resources becomes even more critical. If your digital spending can be restricted, access to real-world assets, food, energy, land, can also be indirectly controlled. The balkanization of global supply chains, as our expert highlighted, further compounds this, allowing regional powers to enforce their digital currency mandates and control resource distribution within their blocs. This Hegelian blueprint is not a theory. It is a historical observation of how power consolidates. From the Bretton Woods Agreement after World War II, which established the dollar's global dominance, to the Patriot Act after 9/11, which expanded surveillance powers, crises have consistently been used as catalysts to introduce solutions that fundamentally alter the landscape of power and freedom. The last FOMC meeting 2025 will likely serve as another critical juncture in this process. It won't be about reversing course. It will be about legitimizing the next step in this engineered transition, moving us inexorably closer to a new, digitally controlled financial architecture. Understanding this pattern is not about succumbing to cynicism. It's about recognizing the game being played and preparing to navigate its treacherous terrain. Asset stripping, the silent transfer of wealth. Following the recognition that our current crises are not random, but part of a larger, engineered shift, we must now turn our attention to one of its most insidious consequences: the silent, yet devastating, transfer of wealth from the vulnerable majority to the institutional elite. This process, often obscured by complex financial jargon, is at the heart of the asset stripping lens, and it operates primarily through two interconnected mechanisms: the Cantillon effect and the strategic acquisition of distressed assets during engineered instability. Let's first dissect the Cantillon effect, a principle that, once understood, fundamentally alters your perception of inflation and monetary policy. Imagine the central bank as the sole source of a financial river. When new money is created, whether through quantitative easing, bailouts, or direct government spending, it doesn't magically appear everywhere at once. Instead, it enters the economy at specific points. The large banks, the major corporations, the government contractors, and those with direct access to credit facilities. These entities are closest to the tap. They receive this fresh, newly minted currency before its value has fully diluted across the entire economy. What do these first receivers do? They spend it. They invest it. They acquire assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, even entire businesses. They do this at prices that have not yet fully reflected the impending inflation caused by the new money. By the time this money trickles down to the broader population, through wages or consumer spending, prices for everything have already begun to rise significantly. The average person receives the diluted, devalued currency and finds that their savings buy less, their wages stretch less far, and the assets they might have hoped to acquire are now astronomically expensive. This is not just a theory. It's a demonstrable economic reality that has played out repeatedly throughout history, accelerating dramatically in recent decades of unprecedented monetary expansion. The Cantillon effect is, therefore, a massive implicit wealth transfer mechanism. It's a stealth tax on the savings and future purchasing power of the many, funneling real resources and assets to the few who are strategically positioned at the initial entry points of new liquidity. Our algorithmic auditor, constantly tracking the flow of capital, can map these trajectories of new money, clearly showing how it inflates asset bubbles for the connected while eroding the foundation of the middle class. The institutional sociologist observes that this effect inherently reinforces existing power structures, making the rich richer not through innovation or productivity, but through privileged access to the monetary spigot. Now, layer this understanding with the concept of engineered crises. As we discussed with the Hegelian dialectic, periods of severe economic instability, market volatility, or even social upheaval are not merely unfortunate occurrences. They create the perfect conditions for the second mechanism of asset stripping, the acquisition of real assets at distressed prices. When markets crash, when small businesses struggle to survive, When individuals face unemployment or foreclosure, they are often forced to sell their assets, their homes, their stocks, their land, their businesses, not at fair market value, but at whatever price they can get to stave off bankruptcy or destitution. Who is in a position to buy these assets? Not the average individual whose savings have been eroded by inflation and whose job may be at risk. No, it is the well-capitalized institutions, the hedge funds, the private equity firms, and the ultra-wealthy individuals who have either benefited from the Cantillon effect or who possess vast reserves of capital. They step in during these moments of maximum pain, scooping up productive assets, factories, farms, energy infrastructure, precious metals, even intellectual property at fire sale prices. This is why you see record corporate profits and massive institutional buying sprees during periods of widespread economic hardship. Consider the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. While millions lost their homes, large investment firms acquired vast portfolios of foreclosed properties at pennies on the dollar, converting them into rental empires. The same pattern is visible in the agricultural sector, where large corporations and sovereign wealth funds are increasingly buying up vast tracts of farmland, consolidating control over food production. Our supply chain fragility expert notes that this consolidation further exacerbates vulnerabilities. As control over essential resources becomes concentrated in fewer hands, increasing systemic risk and potential for manipulation. This isn't just about financial assets. It's about control over the fundamental building blocks of society. The material scientist would emphasize that control over physical resources, land, water, rare earth minerals, energy sources, becomes paramount when the financial system is undergoing such a profound reset. If you can control the production and distribution of these tangible necessities, you hold immense power, regardless of the fluctuating value of any given currency. The asset stripping underway is precisely about consolidating this control. The last FOMC meeting 2025 will likely serve as a crucial inflection point in this process. As the legacy financial system continues its forced move towards a new digital architecture, the accompanying instability will create unprecedented opportunities for this silent wealth transfer. The narratives will focus on stabilization and recovery, but beneath the surface, the process of asset consolidation will accelerate. Your ability to recognize this asset stripping in real time, to understand that market downturns are often engineered opportunities for the powerful, is critical. It's not just about protecting your existing wealth. It's about preventing its silent confiscation through the debasement of currency and the strategic acquisition of real assets by those who are shaping the future financial landscape. The game is rigged, but understanding the rules is the first step towards not being a casualty. Balkanization, the splintering of global systems. We've established how the crushing weight of global debt and the Hegelian dialectic are orchestrating a systemic reset, leading to a silent asset strip. Now, we must turn our gaze outward, to the accelerating fragmentation of the world itself. The unified global systems we've known for decades, global trade, interconnected supply chains, and the unchallenged dominance of a single reserve currency, are not just fraying, they are actively splintering into hostile blocks. This is the era of balkanization, a term traditionally used for geographical division, but which now applies with stark accuracy to our economic and financial landscape. The primary driver of this fragmentation is geopolitical tension, manifesting most visibly in the accelerating trend of de-dollarization. For decades, the US dollar has reigned supreme as the world's reserve currency, underpinning global trade, finance, and commodity markets. This dominance, however, has increasingly been weaponized through sanctions and financial leverage, forcing nations to reconsider their reliance on a system that can be turned against them at any moment. From the perspective of many nation-states, this has become a forced move. They are not choosing to abandon the dollar out of ideological spite, but out of a pragmatic need to protect their national interests and sovereignty from external financial pressure. Enter the BRICS Plus alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a growing list of new members. This bloc is not merely an economic club, it is a direct challenge to the Western-led global order. Their expansion and their explicit push for alternative payment systems and a new, potentially commodity-backed reserve currency is a clear signal of their intent to bypass the dollar-centric system. This isn't just talk, it's backed by concrete actions, from bilateral trade agreements settled in local currencies to the exploration of a common BRICS currency. Our institutional sociologist observes that such movements are not spontaneous. They represent a fundamental shift in power dynamics, where emerging economies are asserting their collective will to reshape global governance and financial architecture. This geopolitical jostling has profound implications for global trade and supply chains. Our supply chain fragility expert has long warned about the inherent vulnerabilities of a hyper-globalized, just-in-time system. The pandemic, followed by geopolitical conflicts, exposed these weaknesses in brutal fashion. Nations are now prioritizing resilience and national security over pure efficiency. This means a retreat from globalization, a push for reshoring or friendshoring, and the formation of regional trade blocs. Instead of a single, interconnected global supply chain, we are seeing the emergence of multiple, distinct supply chains, each serving a particular economic or geopolitical bloc. This creates redundancy, yes, but also higher costs and a potential for greater friction at the new digital and physical borders. The material scientist adds another critical layer to this. Control over essential raw materials, lithium for batteries, rare earth minerals for technology, energy resources, becomes a strategic imperative within these emerging blocs. Nations with abundant resources are leveraging their positions, leading to new alliances and trade agreements that bypass traditional Western-dominated markets. This shift in resource control further cements the fragmentation, as blocs seek self-sufficiency in critical inputs, creating a zero-sum game for vital commodities. The most direct and financially impactful consequence of this balkanization is the splintering of currency blocs. As de-dollarization gains momentum, nations will increasingly conduct trade and settle debts in currencies other than the dollar. This naturally leads to the formation of distinct currency spheres. For instance, a Eurasian bloc might increasingly use the yuan or a basket of regional currencies, while a North American bloc might retain the dollar, and an African bloc might develop its own regional currency mechanism. This fragmentation, in turn, paves the way for the inevitable adoption of regional digital currencies, specifically central bank digital currencies. Why? Because a new digital currency offers a clean slate, a powerful tool for these emerging blocs to establish financial autonomy, bypassing the legacy systems and SWIFT networks that are still heavily influenced by the dominant Western powers. Each bloc will likely develop its own CBDC, tailored to its specific economic and political goals. This is where the panopticon lens and the insights of our algorithmic auditor become critically important. These CBDCs will not be designed for seamless global interoperability and individual freedom across blocs. Instead, they will be powerful instruments for internal control and external strategic advantage within their respective spheres. Imagine digital borders, not just physical ones. Financial firewalls, algorithmic sanctions, and programmable restrictions could control cross-border financial flows, making it difficult, if not impossible, for citizens to move their wealth or transact freely between different economic zones. Your digital wallet could be permissioned to only operate within your specific block, or only with approved partners. Furthermore, the quantum theorist reminds us that the race for quantum-resistant cryptography is not just a defensive measure, it's a strategic offensive. As these blocks solidify, the development and control of quantum-resistant CBDCs and their underlying financial infrastructure will become a critical component of national security and economic dominance. The block that can secure its digital financial system against quantum threats, while potentially being able to compromise others, gains an immense strategic advantage. This technological arms race will further entrench the divisions between blocks, making true global financial interoperability, based on principles of open access and privacy, a distant dream. From the crypto-anarchist philosopher's perspective, this balkanization, coupled with the rise of CBDCs, represents a profound threat to individual freedom. It creates a world where financial mobility is severely curtailed, where economic segregation is enforced by digital means, and where the panopticon effect is amplified within each controlled block. Your ability to escape one system's restrictions by moving your assets or engaging in commerce with another becomes increasingly difficult, if not impossible. The last FOMC meeting 2025 will therefore not occur in a vacuum. Its decisions, while ostensibly domestic, will be made against this backdrop of accelerating global fragmentation. The Fed's actions will be influenced by, and will further influence, the positioning of the dollar and the U.S. within this rapidly changing global chessboard. This isn't just about managing inflation at home. It's about navigating a world that is breaking apart, where the rules of finance are being rewritten by competing powers, and where the individual is caught between the splintering pieces of a once unified global system. Understanding this geopolitical shift is crucial for recognizing the next phase of control and for devising strategies to maintain your financial autonomy in a fractured world. The digital panopticon, CBDCs and algorithmic control. We've traced the systemic collapse, the engineered crises, and the silent transfer of wealth. We've observed the geopolitical fragmentation that is tearing apart global systems. Now, we arrive at the very heart of the new architecture being built to replace the old, the central bank digital currency, or CBDC. This is not merely an incremental upgrade to digital payments. It is the primary tool for the new control grid, poised to redefine the very nature of money, and by extension, your financial autonomy. On the surface, CBDCs are presented as solutions to a myriad of problems, increasing financial efficiency, combating illicit activities, and providing financial inclusion. They are touted as the evolution of money, a convenient, instant, and secure digital form of fiat currency. Yet beneath this veneer of progress lies a fundamental shift in power dynamics, one that introduces an unprecedented level of surveillance and control. This is the panopticon lens, in its purest financial manifestation. Imagine a world where every single transaction you make, every dollar, euro, or yen you earn, spend, or save, is not just digital but also programmable. This is the inherent capability of a CBDC. Unlike physical cash, which offers anonymity, or even existing digital bank transfers, which offer a degree of privacy, a CBDC is centrally issued, controlled, and recorded. Every digital unit of this new money carries with it a unique identifier, linking it inextricably to you, the user. This creates a ledger of your entire financial life, accessible and auditable by the central authority. This is where the role of artificial intelligence and black box algorithms becomes critical. Our algorithmic auditor warns that these CBDCs will not be managed by humans making discretionary decisions on a case-by-case basis. Instead, vast, complex AI systems will be deployed to process, monitor, and enforce the rules of this new digital money. These algorithms, often opaque and proprietary, will determine who gets access to funds, what those funds can be spent on, and under what conditions. The black box nature means that the exact logic, the parameters, and the decision-making processes of these AIs will be hidden from public scrutiny, making it nearly impossible to challenge their judgments or understand why certain financial actions are permitted or denied. Consider the profound implications of programmable money. It means the central authority could, theoretically or practically, embed rules directly into the currency itself. For example, your digital money could have an expiry date, forcing you to spend it within a certain time frame to stimulate consumption. It could be designated for specific purposes only, such as food purchases only or local businesses only, restricting your economic choices. It could even be linked to a social credit score, where certain behaviors, deemed undesirable by the state, could result in financial penalties, reduced access to funds, or even outright confiscation of your digital assets. This is not a dystopian fantasy. These capabilities are openly discussed in white papers and policy documents by central banks around the world. The panopticon effect, originally a concept from philosophy describing a prison design where inmates feel constantly observed, applies perfectly here. With CBDCs, you are not just being watched. Your money itself is watching you. The knowledge that every financial move is recorded, analyzed by algorithms, and subject to programmatic control inevitably changes behavior. It fosters self-censorship, conformity, and a chilling effect on any activity that might deviate from the centrally approved norm. Financial privacy, a cornerstone of individual liberty and a bulwark against state overreach, would be systematically dismantled. From the crypto-anarchist philosopher's perspective, this is the ultimate erosion of financial sovereignty. It transforms money from a neutral medium of exchange into a tool of social engineering and behavioral control. Your ability to opt out, to transact freely, to protect your wealth from arbitrary seizure or depreciation, is severely compromised. It creates a system where the state has unprecedented power to enforce its will, not just through laws and regulations, but through the very fabric of the currency you use. This digital panopticon also plays a crucial role in the balkanization we discussed earlier. As global systems splinter, each economic bloc will likely implement its own CBDC. These national or regional digital currencies will serve as financial firewalls, reinforcing borders and allowing central authorities to control cross-border capital flows with extreme precision. Imagine attempting to move your wealth from one digital currency block to another, only to find it restricted by algorithmic controls or subject to punitive taxes designed to keep capital tethered within its designated sphere. The dream of a truly global, open, and permissionless financial system becomes increasingly distant as these controlled digital blocks solidify. The institutional sociologist understands that institutions, in their quest for stability and control, will always seek to minimize risk and maximize their influence. CBDCs offer the perfect vehicle for this. They address the perceived risks of volatile cryptocurrencies, the anonymity of cash, and the inefficiencies of legacy banking systems, all while providing an unparalleled platform for economic management and social engineering. The narrative will always be one of convenience and security, but the underlying architecture is one of profound control. Furthermore, as our quantum theorist will elaborate in the next segment, the development of quantum-resistant cryptography is not just about securing these CBDCs. It's about ensuring that this new control grid is impervious to future technological threats, cementing its permanence. The race to implement these advanced security protocols, controlled by state actors and their allies, further solidifies their technological dominance over the very infrastructure of money. The last FOMC meeting 2025 will undoubtedly touch upon the future of digital currencies, either directly or indirectly. As the legacy system becomes increasingly unstable and the demand for solutions grows, the push for CBDCs will accelerate. This is not a hypothetical future. It is a rapidly unfolding reality. Understanding the true nature of the digital panopticon and its algorithmic controls is not about fear-mongering. It's about recognizing the profound implications for your financial freedom and preparing to navigate a world where money itself has become a weapon of control. Quantum threat, the end of old encryption, the rise of new power. We have systematically peeled back the layers of the impending financial reset, from the Fed's impossible position to the engineered crises, the silent asset stripping, and the balkanization of global systems culminating in the digital panopticon of CBDCs. Now, we must confront a force that operates on an even deeper, more fundamental level: quantum computing. This isn't science fiction. It is a rapidly advancing reality that poses an existential threat to all current encryption standards, including those underpinning our entire global financial system, and crucially, the nascent blockchain technologies that promised a path to decentralization. The implications are staggering, and understanding them is paramount to grasping the true scope of the new control architecture. To put it simply, imagine every digital lock and key that secures your online banking, your emails, your cryptocurrency wallets, and even the national security communications of governments. These locks are currently protected by mathematical problems that are incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for even the most powerful supercomputers to solve in a reasonable time frame. We're talking about algorithms like RSA and elliptic curve cryptography, which rely on the difficulty of factoring very large numbers or solving complex mathematical equations. Our quantum theorist explains that a sufficiently powerful quantum computer, utilizing algorithms like Shor's algorithm, could break these encryption schemes in a matter of minutes or even seconds. This isn't an incremental improvement. It's a fundamental paradigm shift. It means that any data encrypted with current methods, if intercepted today, could be stored and decrypted retroactively once a quantum computer reaches cryptographically relevant power. This is often referred to as a store now, decrypt later attack. The implications for sensitive government data, corporate secrets, and personal financial information are catastrophic. Every digital interaction, every transaction, every piece of encrypted communication would be laid bare. For the financial system, this represents an undeniable forced move. The institutions that govern our money cannot afford to have their systems compromised. If quantum computers can break bank security, credit card transactions, or the integrity of financial ledgers, the entire system collapses. Therefore, central banks, major financial institutions, and governments are in a desperate, high-stakes race to develop and implement post-quantum cryptography, PQC, new encryption standards designed to resist quantum attacks. This isn't optional. It's an imperative for the survival of any digital infrastructure, especially the one being designed for CBDCs. But this race for quantum-resistant cryptography is not merely about security. It is fundamentally about who controls the next generation of digital infrastructure. The development of PQC is a massive undertaking, requiring immense resources, advanced mathematical expertise, and cutting-edge hardware. Who is leading this charge? primarily state actors, their intelligence agencies, and a handful of colossal tech corporations. These are the very entities that stand to gain the most from controlling the foundational security layers of the future. The institutional sociologist observes that this technological transition represents another powerful vector for institutional control. By being at the forefront of PQC development and implementation, these powerful actors get to dictate the new standards, own the intellectual property, and control access to the most secure digital environments. This creates a deeply embedded technological advantage, essentially building a new, more secure digital fortress that only they have the keys to. The cost and complexity of transitioning to PQC will also create significant barriers to entry for smaller players, further consolidating power and asset stripping from those unable to adapt. Consider how this intertwines with the rise of central bank digital currencies. A CBDC, as we discussed, is designed to be a highly controlled, programmable form of money. For such a system to function and be universally adopted, it must be perceived as absolutely secure. A quantum-resistant CBDC, therefore, is not just a logical evolution. It's a strategic necessity for the architects of the digital panopticon. Imagine a CBDC infrastructure that is impervious to quantum attacks, while older, less secure financial systems, perhaps even existing decentralized cryptocurrencies relying on pre-quantum encryption, remain vulnerable. This creates a stark, two-tiered digital reality. The quantum-secure CBDC becomes the ultimate, unassailable control grid, while anything outside of it is exposed and potentially compromised. Our algorithmic auditor highlights that the integration of PQC with CBDCs, managed by black box AI algorithms, creates an unprecedented level of financial surveillance and enforcement. Quantum-resistant algorithms, while securing the system from external threats, can also be used internally to process and analyze vast datasets of transactional information at speeds unimaginable today. This exponentially enhances the panopticon effect, making the monitoring and control of individual financial behavior even more robust and difficult to evade. The sheer computational power of quantum systems, even in their current nascent stages, hints at a future where algorithmic auditing is not just about identifying anomalies, but predicting and preempting financial actions. The balkanization of global systems further complicates this quantum dynamic. As different geopolitical blocs emerge, each will undoubtedly pursue its own independent development and implementation of PQC standards for its respective digital currencies and critical infrastructure. This could lead to a fragmented global digital landscape, where cryptographic compatibility becomes a new form of digital border control. Imagine a world where the quantum-resistant CBDC of one block cannot securely interact with that of another, or where data encrypted under one nation's PQC standards is deemed insecure by another. This creates cryptographic firewalls that reinforce geopolitical divisions, making cross-border financial activity and data exchange even more complex and controlled. The supply chain fragility expert would point out that this fragmentation extends to the digital realm, creating vulnerabilities at the interfaces between these disparate, quantum-secured systems. From the perspective of the crypto-anarchist philosopher, this quantum shift is profoundly alarming. The promise of decentralized, censorship-resistant cryptocurrencies, which rely on the cryptographic security of current public key algorithms, faces an existential threat. While many projects are actively working on quantum-resistant solutions, the resources and centralized coordination required to implement these across a global, decentralized network are immense. If state-backed, quantum-resistant CBDCs emerge before decentralized alternatives can fully adapt, it could create a quantum gap, where the state gains an overwhelming cryptographic advantage, effectively undermining the security and privacy of non-state digital currencies. This would be a forced move towards state-controlled digital finance, not just by policy, but by technological superiority. Finally, the material scientist reminds us that quantum computing itself relies on cutting-edge materials and highly specialized manufacturing processes, superconductors, trapped ions, topological qubits. The control over the supply chains for these exotic materials and the intellectual property surrounding their fabrication becomes a strategic national asset. The nations and corporations that master these material sciences will hold a significant advantage in the quantum arms race, further cementing their position at the apex of the new digital power structure. The last FOMC meeting 2025 will therefore take place on the precipice of a quantum revolution. While direct mentions might be subtle, the underlying strategic imperative to secure the future financial system against quantum threats is a silent driver behind the push for new digital architectures. This isn't just a technical footnote, it's a fundamental recalibration of power in the digital age. Control over quantum-resistant infrastructure means control over the very fabric of future finance, communication, and surveillance. Understanding this technological pivot is crucial for comprehending the depth of institutional control being established, and for identifying genuine paths to autonomy in a world where digital security is paramount. Survival beyond the cage, decentralized autonomy and tangible wealth. We have meticulously dissected the forces converging on the last FOMC meeting 2025. The mathematical insolvency of the global debt system, the Hegelian blueprint for engineered crises, the silent asset stripping of the vulnerable, the balkanization of the world into competing blocks, the chilling advent of the digital panopticon through CBDCs, and the existential threat of quantum computing to our current digital security. The picture painted is one of a systemic reset, a forced move towards unprecedented institutional control over finance and individual autonomy. But understanding the trap is only the first step. The critical question now is, how do we navigate this evolving landscape? How do we secure our wealth and freedom beyond the confines of this emerging digital cage? This is where we introduce the alien solution, a strategic pivot towards decentralized autonomy and tangible wealth. It's an approach that deliberately counters every vector of control we've identified, offering a path to resilience and sovereignty in a world increasingly designed for compliance. First, let's address the digital realm. The primary countermeasure to the digital panopticon and programmable CBDCs is the embrace of permissionless, decentralized finance, or DeFi, coupled with the absolute necessity of self-custody. Our crypto-anarchist philosopher has long championed the principles of cryptographic peer-to-peer systems that operate outside the control of central authorities. Unlike CBDCs, which are centralized and permissioned, true decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and many others are designed to be censorship-resistant, transparent on their public ledgers, and ultimately self-sovereign. Self-custody means holding the private keys to your digital assets, effectively becoming your own bank. This removes the intermediary, the trusted third party that can freeze your account, confiscate your funds, or dictate how you spend your money. It's a direct response to the panopticon lens. If you control your keys, you control your money, regardless of what an algorithmic auditor or a central bank might attempt to impose. While the quantum theorist warns of future threats to current encryption, the leading decentralized projects are actively researching and implementing post-quantum cryptography, striving to stay ahead of this technological arms race and maintain their security and censorship resistance. The goal is to create a parallel financial infrastructure that is robust, resilient, and independent of state control. This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about preserving financial freedom. Second, and equally vital, is the re-emphasis on tangible, scarce assets as true wealth. In an era of rampant monetary debasement through the Cantillon effect and the inevitable inflationary pressures of a debt-laden system, paper assets and even digital currencies within a controlled system are vulnerable. Real wealth, historically, has always resided in things that are physically scarce, universally desired, and intrinsically valuable, regardless of government decree or digital programming. Precious metals like gold and silver stand as the timeless bedrock of wealth preservation. They cannot be printed into existence, they carry no counterparty risk, and they have served as money for millennia precisely because of their immutable physical properties. They are the ultimate hedge against currency debasement and systemic financial instability. Our material scientist highlights that these elements possess intrinsic value derived from their atomic structure and rarity, which no digital system can replicate. Holding physical gold and silver, stored securely and outside the banking system, is a direct counter to asset stripping and the forced move of governments towards digital control. Beyond precious metals, consider productive land, real estate, and physical commodities. Owning fertile land provides food security and a degree of self-sufficiency, insulating you from fragile supply chains and balkanized resource allocations. Investing in real, income-producing assets that are not easily digitized or controlled by central algorithms offers another layer of protection. These are assets that exist in the physical world, outside the digital cage, and they provide a fundamental anchor of value when currencies fluctuate wildly. The supply chain fragility expert would strongly advocate for localizing your resource acquisition and production, reducing reliance on globalized systems that are increasingly prone to disruption. Third, and perhaps most importantly, is the focus on building resilient local networks and developing skills that transcend the digital control grid. In a world of balkanized blocks and digital panopticons, your immediate community becomes your most critical line of defense. Cultivating strong, trust-based relationships with like-minded individuals, engaging in local commerce, and fostering community resilience offers a powerful counter-narrative to centralized control. This is the essence of what the institutional sociologist would identify as a parallel society, forming within the cracks of the collapsing old order. Developing practical, tangible skills, be it gardening, repair, craftsmanship, or alternative energy solutions, becomes an invaluable form of personal wealth. These are skills that operate independently of digital systems, cannot be censored, and provide real value in any economic climate. They enhance your self-sufficiency and reduce your reliance on centralized infrastructure, mitigating the impact of supply chain disruptions and algorithmic restrictions. The last FOMC meeting 2025 will be a milestone, not an endpoint. It will likely signal the acceleration of the trends we've discussed, solidifying the institutional push towards a new, digitally controlled financial order. But for those who understand the game, it also represents a critical window of opportunity. The path to survival beyond the cage is not about resisting the inevitable technological shifts, but about understanding their true implications and strategically positioning yourself. It's about embracing the parallel economy of decentralized finance and tangible assets, cultivating self-custody, and building robust, resilient local networks. This dual strategy, digital independence where possible and physical sovereignty as a bedrock, offers the most viable route to preserving your wealth, your privacy, and your autonomy in the turbulent years ahead. The choice is yours. Be a compliant node in the digital panopticon, or forge a path towards true financial freedom.